You can't tell me that in a party that can have over 50 political parties on the ballot for national elections, you can't tell me there are no options. What do you mean there are no options? And if there are no options, what are you doing about it? Because if there are no options, then it means you have an idea of what it is that can take us from this situation and take us maybe from point A to point B. So why are you not coming with it? It also speaks to responsibility.
I know. For me, it's just an excuse, Puso. You can't tell me between ANC, DA, EFF, Action SA, Rise Mzansi,
IFP.
You mean you can't find any friends here? Really? No friends. Like you can't find anyone whom you can say, look, okay, I don't fully agree with you, but I can ride with you.
Yeah.
Not one. Not a one.
And you can't tell me that of all those verses that you've mentioned, you can't find at least one where you can say, I agree with you at least 70%. We don't want 100% because there's no perfection in politics.
Yeah.
But you can't tell me all of them, they disappoint you. Then the problem is you.
You see, and then you must ask that person, well, what do you do? I mean, politically, you'll find they're probably not active. They probably don't even know who their ward councillor is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, it becomes an issue. You know, it becomes a problem because, for me, this is the issue I always have, that what about that responsibility on the side of the citizens, you know, to get involved? You know, I mean, and that's why I was almost sold on Rise Mzansi, you know, because I was like, here are some, you know, professional black people like myself who seem to have some kind of ideological system going on, you know, and they have decided to stand up, you know, at peril to themselves. You know what I'm saying?
To become the solution.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I was almost sold, you understand? But I mean, obviously, we can talk about that at some other time. I don't want us to get into the details of the journey I went through there with Rise and Zanzi, you know. But I mean, it's just to say, but you can't be just sitting there and then no options, no ideas, no new way forward, nothing. But yeah, it doesn't work, this thing. You know the system. Yeah, so then what must happen?
And that's my critique. That's my critique to people who stay away from voting as well. It's the same critique.
Yeah.
Because, and we had this conversation the last time when we were speaking, when we were dissecting the stats.
Yeah.
The voting stats in the last general elections in 2019.
Yeah.
That millions of people essentially boycotted going to vote.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the popular narrative is the political system is no longer saving them. It's fine. I accept that. It's no longer saving them, clearly. But what are they doing about it? Because folding your arms is not doing something. And in as much as we have the right to vote and the right to choose our own government, we have a responsibility to do exactly that. Exactly. So if we neglect or we abandon our right to choose the government, then we have the responsibility to bring an alternative. And if that alternative is a social movement, it's okay as long as there's an alternative. But I have a problem with us just infantilizing adults and just saying, you know, they're powerless.
Exactly.
The system no longer serves them, so they withdraw. What are they doing? The people have to be told that they have a responsibility as well. In as much as they have the right, it goes with the responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, Puso, for me, even if you plugged in your own Orania somewhere and you said, I'm claiming this land by force and I'm creating a new state. This is me. I represent the kingdom of Wakanda. You know, this is me. This is my stand. Yo, I'll support you, you know.
Because you're doing something.
Because you've taken a position, you know. But I mean, if there's no position in the system, no position out the system, nothing. It's just, it doesn't work. So we must just sit and die. No. So, so for me, it's like, nah, you have to have some other, because I also don't believe we should only focus on political solutions, but even outside the political system in terms of voting, we should be politically active in all avenues. In
And that's
terms of, for
essentially
example,
what I'm saying as well. I want
yeah,
people to be doing something.
yeah, because
Yeah.
you have to be fighting in the politics of money, fighting in the politics of food, fighting in the politics of media, in the politics of language, in the politics of all aspects. You understand?
Yeah. So
And
if
for
you
me,
don't vote, for example, you don't vote, 9 million people don't vote, it's fine. Then they decide to come together to form cooperatives, community banks or something, put their money together, anything. This is just what's coming. That's just what's coming at the top of my head. That's something. These are people who are disengaging from the system because they've realized that it's no longer serving them, and they're coming up with an alternative that's going to serve them. But to disengage and still go back to beg and still go to beg grants and still go, I'm not. I understand it's your right. Yeah. But I'm gonna have to have a serious conversation with you and hold you accountable as well.
Yeah.
You are entitled, by the way, to those grants and government, the state assisting you and coming to your rescue. You are entitled. But you must also take a level of responsibility. And if it means voting, go vote. Even if you vote for these ones, just vote. Because you can't, you don't want to think about anything else. So it's okay, just keep voting. Yeah. If you disengage from voting, do something. That's all I'm saying.
Fuso, I think those conversations, let's say for the other political discussion series, those ones are for that one specifically. But today, let me take you back to the video. So you said the thing that stood out for you was talking about political interest, aligning interest, and then the other thing, quickly.
Yeah, the thing was aligning interest and the question of race, especially in South African politics.
Yeah.
You raised the question of DA and Umusi and all that, and I think it's also something that you touched on here around how geopolitical events somehow shape local politics, and I like the example that you made around how, when you just when you easily fall into propaganda from local political organizations, you may end up voting for them, even though globally they are aligned or they support certain events and certain forces that are actually against you. And the case in point for me has been the war in Gaza by Israel, which essentially has been a war against Islam and Muslims, right? And when you look into how the DA, for example, has historically enjoyed the support of South African Muslims, right? But the DA is funded by Zionists. The DA support Israel. Yeah. So a typical South African Muslim who is not aware of that is going to continue giving DA political power. Exactly. Because they're not aware that actually these people are being funded by the very same forces that are against in my religion
and my interest.
And my interest, right? So I think that level of awareness is going to assist you to align your interests both locally and globally.
So you see, the true words that are going to be associated with these podcasts is, number one, critical thinking. Number two, alignment of interests, political interests. These are the crucial elements. So yeah, thanks for that. So let's get into what I wanted for us to reflect on. Yeah. So geopolitical reflections in general. I've often thought a lot about Pan Afrikanism, and I think we discussed a bit about its development, how the different events in the world influenced it and it influenced them at different times, things like the Haitian Revolution, you know, creating this spark and sending this surge into the universe and to Africans to know that, hey, you can actually revolt, and you know, you don't have to continue in the colonial ways. You can actually fight back. And so, you know, all of a sudden all these Africans started to get ideas, which is why Haiti will always be hated by the colonialists, because they created a problem.
It created a problem. And you know, when reflecting about Haiti, to just chip in there, when reflecting about Haiti, I always tell people that there is the immediate response there, especially from the then powers, especially from Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte says something very interesting in reacting to the revolution. He says the revolution has to be quelled and stopped because, and this is the most important part, it should stop the march of blacks in history. Those are his words. Those are his words. Now, what march of blacks in history is he speaking about is exactly what has been happening to black people since 1803 at the Haitian Revolution.
That's a deep statement, y'all. I mean, Napoleon is not, I mean, he's not just, you know, a lightweight. You know, this is a military man. You know,
he's at the helm of France. He's at the helm of France. He's the powerful man in Europe at the time.
Exactly. So you then understand very well the march of the blacks in history. What we are talking about here is not just, no, you must stop these guys from, you know, taking back their power in this
killing
particular
our people and all that.
Yeah, and you know, stop these guys from doing this shenanigans here. This is not what he's saying. He is saying the ultimate potential of this to, you know, and that's why all African leaders who appear to be confident in themselves, who have a clear vision for their people, they will never be championed by the Western powers, you know, unless they are still somehow controlled. But they will never be liked if they are truly independent, you know, and they are really just focusing on a program for the empowerment of their people. And they don't care what the interests of America, France, Europe are. You know, they'll never let you get away with that, those guys.
Of course.
You know, and people have to understand, they're not just gonna say, oh, okay, so that's how you wanna do it. If you don't believe us, ask Lumumba. If you don't believe it, ask Lumumba, ask Sankara. If you don't believe us, ask you know, ain't nobody
ask
just free here to.
Recently, ask Magufuli. He's there in your picture.
Gaddafi.
Ask Gaddafi. Yeah.
If you there is no just, yeah, we'll let you. We see you are really running a program for the benefit and interest of your people. How can we support you? Ain't none of that. It is, yo, don't you dare touch our interest. And you're like, no, but guys, if I do this, it's gonna benefit my people. Don't you dare touch our interest. That's all we are saying. Because that's how they talk, isn't it? We are now concerned that the interests of the United States of America are threatened in the region. That's how they talk, right? So it's very clear to me that if you don't understand, if you don't have that geopolitical understanding, you will really be confused about what's happening globally. So let me bring you in, and to bring you in, Puso, I was reflecting on this. So we've outlined the history of Pan Afrikanism and all the different events it influenced and was influenced by. You know, there's obviously a lot, but you know, in my reflections about it, I think about now in 2024, it's been over half a century since the establishment of the OAU in 1963. We know it went on to become the African Union, but really the mother body, the initial, was the Organization of African Unity, which then became the African Union, I think, in 2002, through Mbeki, I think was the president at the time.
Yeah.
So 1963, that is 61 years. Now in 2024, 61 years. I'm just going to give you a moment to opine on the matter. Just your reflection. Like, what is it that you think about when you think about that moment in history and how it unfolded? Thinking about all the dynamics, how the original idea was one Africa and all of that, and then it sort of pivoted into, no, let's just have an association of sorts. And then, from there, how has the Pan African project fared? So that's why I'm saying reflections, geopolitical reflections. I wanted us to start from that point.
Yeah, I think for me, I look back at 1963 at that moment, and for me, it was a missed opportunity. I think when you remember, we have two blocks in 63, leading to 63 actually, that have come to be known as the Casablanca block and the Monrovia block. And we know the stance. And for the viewers here, the Casablanca block were the so-called integrationists, in a sense that they were pro-African unity, but they were proponents of integration over time, to say we're going to regionally integrate over time, and then ultimately we will unite into a more politically, socially, and even culturally cohesive force. Whereas the immediate counterparts, the Monrovia, were like, we have to unite now. In fact, to quote Nkrumah says, it's so immediate that if you do not unite, we're going to perish. Yeah. And for me, that was the immediate opportunity. We should have went the Monrovia way then. We should have went the Monrovia. We know South Africa at the time under Apartheid National Party, Bure, and all that just going. It's not like we're going to be part then, but I think ultimately we don't know what would have happened anyway. Yeah. But that was a missed opportunity, because that was the only time in the last 61 years, that Africa had an ample chance to unite, both militarily and politically and establish a federal state. So for me, that's what comes to mind. And coming back to when I look back now where we are, there are proponents of that level, that form of unity, Julius Malema being the most vociferous one at the moment. I don't think that at the moment it can happen. I think ideally, I'm still pro that, because I understand what it will mean, both for Africans in the continent and in the diaspora.
Yeah.
And the central
and you see,
role.
also, if I can jump in there, I think I'm the same. You know what I'm saying? I'm the same as you, in that, in principle, and as someone who looks at politics globally, I understand obviously the great advantage that would come with that. But like I said in one of my previous videos, I just don't know in practice if at this moment it could be realized, with all the different dynamics, because you have to understand over the years, what the Casablanca group, which ultimately won, right? Because that's how we ended up with this association of sorts. And evidently, their approach has not worked. We have not gradually come together to form that unitary political, entity that they made reference to. So it hasn't happened. In fact, we have never been more fractured, now. You understand? So The chance of it happening now, man, it might even take a miracle. Whereas at that time, when you had not even formed any kind of African association, that was a strike the iron while it's hot type of moment.
And hence, I'm saying it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, because that then ultimately determined the trajectory of where we were gonna go. You understand? And the thing is, you know, Puzo, there's a big problem with precedent, and that's why in the law, precedent is one of the biggest problems that someone can spring on you. You know, that thing of precedent. So now we've created a precedent of operating a certain way, and this thing has become entrenched for over 60 years for a lot of the countries, and a bit less for countries like South Africa. But in general, that whole organization of African unity is that old. And in the time, whatever years it has existed, those things have become entrenched. And you know that changing things is not easy, especially changing institutions is not easy. So, you know, that's why it becomes even more difficult now. And, you know, so I think I agree with that reflection. That I also agree with it. You know, in principle, generally, I understand if it could be done effectively, what the ultimate benefit would be for all of us Africans globally. You know, and you know, one of the things also that comes up for me, and every time I raise, and it connects with this point we're talking about, this idea of unity among Africans. That, I mean, if those few guys in that room, they couldn't get it together on behalf of all of us, our appointed representatives from all African regions, how are we supposed, as billions of Africans, how are we supposed to come together? You know, I mean, it's really such a huge ask. You know, and that's why we really have to be strategic in how we think about how we can unify our efforts and energies in a very real way that would benefit all of us, that would be mutually beneficial. And we also need to get over this thing of trying to use Pan-Afrikanism to excuse, you know, certain behaviors that advantage one side against the other, you know. Now, trying to use Pan-Afrikanism as a manipulative tactic, as a blackmail of sorts. I think we need to also get over that, and we need
what I think as well,
start
just to add on to
genuine issues. You know,
just to add on to what you say, I think we need to now appreciate the political conditions of our time, and given that we need to redefine what unity could mean now, given what's happening globally. It doesn't mean, it doesn't help us if we're going to be stuck on the ideals of the 60s, the 40s, the 50s. If they no longer serve us now, given the prevailing material conditions on the ground and globally, especially, right? And what I mean by that is that maybe the time is ripe for now to redefine what Pan-Africanism could mean to us now. And of course, this doesn't mean us neglecting, you know, the fundamental roots of Pan-Africanism, which are essentially the unity of Africans. It's just to redefine ways in which we could unite now in the 21st century. Now, when
in other words, at a material level and at an operational level, what does that look like?
Exactly what I'm saying. Especially, and when we're speaking about Africa today, how can we unite without necessarily, you know, dissolving into one federation? because that's not going to help us at the moment, given a lot of things that are happening, given the global balance of forces. It's not going to help us. But why don't we start?
And also, I don't see it likely happening as well.
No, I don't see it happening as well. But how about we push more for things like trade, intracontinental trade, get rid of things like visas to make travel much more easier, cultural unity, cultural exchanges. There's a lot of things that we can do to promote Pan-Africanist values without necessarily dissolving these Bantustan states, as Chinwezu calls them, into one single federal state, which, by the way, given the material conditions, given the balance of forces globally, has a potential of just being, one big Bantustan state.
Exactly. Because ultimately, again, the question of interest is going to come up, because we know that these so-called African head of states, they don't all share the same interest. So how are you going to have a federation? Because for the federation to work, the US works as a federation because there is no one who is politically aligned differently among those states. Everyone is American of those states, and they uphold American values. You understand? They don't uphold, there's no values of California or values of,
my brother, we still
use or whatever.
We still use our colonizers' identity in Africa. There's still Francophone Africa, Anglophone, Lusophone, and stuff like that. And that should just tell you where our interest actually lies. Right? So we need creative ways of fostering this unity. We need to foster this unity, creatively and using and pragmatically as well. And we need to jettison this whole notion of a federal Africa, because it's not going to happen. Museveni is not going to let go of Uganda just because of his nice sounding, one African state. Museveni wants power, and Uganda is his personal fiefdom. And there are many like him around the continent.
Exactly. and one of the unfortunate realities that has taken place that we have observed is that that whole club of the AU, no one holds anyone accountable, eh?
No, there isn't. Even the mechanisms are weak. Even the mechanisms are weak. Even things like Pan African Parliament, that's just for show, man.
No one comes through and says, when are you better when?
No, of course. And you look into, let's say, let's leave AU for example. You even come to SADC.
Yeah.
Right. You look into how Mnangagwa has been conducting elections with ZANU-PF. And just generally how they've been treating opposition. Like no one in SADC actually has balls to call Mnangagwa out. Like recently with the elections, Hichilema of Zambia says no. There may have been some problems with these elections which render them not entirely free and fair through SADC. And it was like he's committed a sin, because that's not how business is run. How business is run is that when the electoral commission of that country says elections have concluded, we all congratulate the leader as a club. So you are doing something
that is the protocol.
That's the modus operandi. So when Hichilema does that, they look at Hichilema differently. You are uninitiated.
You don't understand how things work around here.
Right. So we don't have that. These guys are more loyal to each other than they are to the people that they claim they represent.